We're live.
So welcome to the Node.js package maintenance working group meeting on the 25th of March 2021. The agenda is in the package maintenance repo. It's issue 456. Are there any announcements folks would like to make at the start of the session today? Okay, so I think it makes sense to move on to the first item on the agenda, which is the Wibby demo. So I believe Dominicus, it's probably over to you to share.
All right. Okay, so Wibby. Share screen. You should see my screen now.
Yep.
It's GitHub and terminal a little bit. Yeah, okay, so just a very, very quick intro for someone who may not be familiar with what Wibby is, what we're trying to do there. Wibby stands for Will I Break You? And it's basically a tool that we're trying to build and experiment with in how you could have something that allows you to verify that whatever you're building does not break any downstream dependence that basically depend on your package. There have been some tools in sort of similar area over time. This does things a little bit differently in that it tries to run the downstream tests of the dependence using the tooling that these dependents use, right? So if a dependent is tested using GitHub Actions, it will try to run these GitHub Actions. And the way it approaches that is it basically, when you run Wibby in your package, it tries to link that version of that package, that specific Git version of that package into your dependence. And then it either, well, we don't have that functionality yet, but it basically pushes a branch into the dependent repositories. And that in theory triggers the CI of these dependent packages using the exact same setup that they would be using if a regular PR were to be opened. Which maybe gives you some better results, but also maybe it results in less maintenance and also spreads out the usage of CI minutes if you are constrained there. So I'm going to give a quick demo of where we are right now. We're kind of approaching MVP, although I am finding issues. I am finding gotchas with the approach, and then there's a couple of things that maybe we'd like to resolve. But yeah, let's see where we are, and let's see what the response is, and maybe we can start to onboard at least some people to try it out in some other repos. So what I have here is I created a new repository called parent, and this repository is used by the following 3 downstream packages. One of those will always pass if you run CI, one of those will always fail, and the last one has multiple checks. One will fail, one will succeed. I have already set up this repository to have a Wibby JSON. Wibby JSON defines a list of dependents that you want to test in. You just list out the repositories that you would be pulling against. In the current incarnation of it, it needs push access to these repositories, right? So at the moment, you would probably be only running it in your organization that you own, or you could create the forks of these dependents that you want to make sure you're not breaking in an organization that you control, which may even be a better option because at the end of the day, you may not want to be opening many test pull requests against the repositories that you don't own. So there's definitely a theme for tooling to build out there if this is an approach that works. So I have a Wibby JSON, which defines a list of repositories we want to test against, and I have Wibby. I'm going to be testing with some things with my local version that I just have for this demo because it has some fixes that I uncovered while I was preparing for this. So suppose you have a parent repository and you want to test some dependents and you want to kick that off with a GitHub action. So we have a Wibby workflow that you can use, and I prepared a command that you can use in your repository to install Wibby in the first place, right? So you could run Wibby, just directly in the command line, right? You could do Wibby test from the command line, and maybe we can take a look at that as well. Maybe I should start with that. Actually, yeah, let's start with that. Suppose I am on a new branch test. I have a README. I'm making a change in the README, and I'm going to commit no GPG sign because I don't have my UTB key plugged in, and I'm going to push this. Okay, so we have a new branch, and I am going to link that into my dependents by doing npx webby test. So this will loop through all the dependents, but you could also just do a single dependent. I think you do dependent and you give it a GitHub URL, GJS env, if that were a dependent, right? So if I run npx webby test, what it will do is it will tell me that I don't have my token in the environment. Right, so it will pull down these, it will push the changes to all the dependents that I am depending in. So what happened here is in my repositories, in each of those, I now have a webby test branch that is pushed in. And what the branch contains is basically, it tells, we're going to be testing with webby test parent from GitHub from this branch. And that kicked off the CI job, which in this case, in the fail repo, it eventually failed. And now in my local environment, I can do npx webby result, and it will go off, and it will check what happened. It will go and test the status checks for that specific branch that we pushed on these repositories. So I can see that in the pastoral, I have one check which failed, one check which succeeded. Yeah, and that's basically the CLI approach of how you would be using it. You push a package JSON update to link in your package directly from Git, and you run the tests there. Then you can collect the results. Yeah, so obviously you probably don't want to be doing that from your local machine. Like the greatest benefit is if you can install it in your repository, and then you can do things there. So we have a tool, GitHub workflow install. So what did I need to create the folder? -p. Close. Oops, what happened here? Demo gods, I didn't make a sacrifice. You probably need to one of these little ones there. Copy from GitHub workflows webby to parent GitHub. Did I have a typo in the folder name? Destination. No such file. Okay, I am on the wrong branch. Am I on the wrong branch here? I'm sorry. Yeah, I am on the wrong. Where is my webby? Where is it? And it copied the file and it installed it. So I'm going to push it. Install webby. And this pushes me a workflow that allows me to use webby inside pull requests. So I'm going to, oops, go on, go back. I'm going to open a pull request for the test thing that we did there. And I will also clean the branches because this is something that's in the works. It cannot push to existing branches because there's work to be done. Because it will reuse the branch name based on the name of the branch that I have in my package here, which would allow you, like if you were working on multiple packages that have the same dependents, you could use the same branch there, and then you could link both of these packages that you're working on into the single dependent, and then you can test them together. So the way you kick off webby at the current approach is it's not ideal. There's some gotchas there because one is there's a bug in GitHub, which basically does not correctly assign the permissions to the person posting the comment, because you don't want to have any random person coming in and running webby test. You want only the collaborators doing that. Alternative approach is to use labels. So something like you would add a label which says kickoff Wibby, which already has permissions assigned to only people who have at least triage permission, I believe. And then that would kick off, but it's a bit trickier to implement and maybe doesn't have as nice flow, a flow in terms of how you go end to end, but I mean, remains to be seen. We'll need to get some feedback. So if I post a comment Wibby test, this is going to take a moment, a very short moment, hopefully, but it basically kicks off a GitHub workflow, which checks the permissions first, and then it will kick off the test. And now I should have the status check go on. Right. And basically what the job does is effectively just runs Wibby tests just like I did in the CLI, right? Because that's what CI does. It's just a fancy wrapper around CLI commands, right? So I have now a Wibby test running. It's in progress. What happened here is it, just like before, it created the branches. It kicked off the CI jobs there. And you know, now you're waiting for the results. And to get the results, you similarly as you would do in the CLI, you do Wibby result. Yeah, this finished, and this finished. If it's in progress, it would just report that it's in progress. You do a Wibby result, which in turn kicks off another action, which once again checks the permissions, and then it goes off and collects the result. It takes a short moment.
Just from the UI perspective, is there any reason that when the first one finished, it couldn't kick off the result and post it back to the same issue?
Yeah, so there's the problem there in that GitHub Actions do not provide a sensible primitive, which does not waste any minutes for polling for results on a schedule, right?
Okay.
So you need a human interaction. In this particular case, I have all the repositories in the same organization, so I could probably do something to post back a hook. But otherwise, if it were a different repository, Wibby test/pass has no way to tell,
right,
that, first of all, that it was Wibby that pushed the branch.
Yep.
Because we're using the setup of this repository rather than something else. So basically, it just kicks off the regular standard CI process. We're not making any modifications there.
Yep.
So it has no way to tell our original PR back that, you know, I'm done. So if you don't have a way to post that via the
Yep.
hook, post back via the hook, you're short of, you basically can only do polling. And if you want to do polling, it means that you are running an action all the time doing the polling, and that action consumes the GitHub minutes
right.
just for polling, which would be super wasteful.
Right.
And yeah,
okay.
that's what you can do. So what I do is, yeah.
This is a bit excuse me. This is a bit hacky, but you could probably have the action post a comment and then have an app that Wibby is running that's separate from GitHub Actions.
Yeah.
Listen for that comment or something like that. So
yeah, that's an option. The goal, one of the design goals here is, and this is the reason why it's a GitHub workflow, and it's using this funky, you know, GitHub install workflow thing as opposed to a GitHub application, is that this does not need any server setup. I don't want to be running any server setup. I don't want to be maintaining a CI server. I don't want to be maintaining an application. I don't want to share secrets with the team. I don't want to be doing all of that work, right? What you want is for the thing to just work. GitHub does provide a way to run actions on a schedule. So in theory, you could have a workflow which every 10 minutes goes off and checks the results for all the PRs that are open and reports the results. The problem with that is that even if you do it once every 10 minutes, you will still end up with 4,000 runs a month, which is still a lot of minutes.
Expensive, yeah.
Ideally, you would be able to tell GitHub, once you do Wibby test, you would be able to tell GitHub, please kick off a Wibby result automatically in 5 minutes. But they don't offer such primitive just yet. So maybe you know, eventually somewhere somehow. But this is unfortunately the way it works right now. There are improvements and
it's not a big deal. I was just curious, but that's a very good explanation.
Isn't there a repository dispatch now? We don't need to get into it. Sorry, I'm absolutely sorry.
No, if you could open an issue and post some links there about. I haven't been following the latest updates to actions for the past few months, so maybe there is something new. I'd really appreciate any kind of ideas on how to improve this, because you're rightfully saying this is slightly less than an ideal, situation and the workflow there. But yeah, basically you need to kick off the check manually. And the check reports the result, and it reports the result because basically it went out and it checked and it saw that some of these repositories were failing the CI, and then it completed with an error, and it reported that back to the action. And basically that's where we are right now. There's lots of improvements to be made, like this details link. Ideally it would link to here. There's permissions, there's tokens a little bit, because for now you need push access, but I think Glenn volunteered to implement the PR approach, which means that you could be opening pull requests. You'd still need a fork of some sort, so you'd need to maintain something to deal with the forks. And then the comment together results is less than ideal, and reusing the branch, it still needs a little bit of thought on how to best approach if the branch exists, because in some cases you may want to rebase that branch. You may want to check. In some cases you might not be able to automatically rebase that branch, but there's some gotchas there. So implementation details. But yeah, this is where we are right now.
Yeah, it looks pretty neat in terms of like automatically running those tests. And I guess it's like, you were mentioning, like in this case, they're all forks within your own org. Have you come across very many packages where they do something, I know there's going to be some, but they're dependent on their own environment. So if you just have your fork, you're not going to be able to run the.
I mean, at the moment, you need push access, and that's the limitation there right now.
Right.
The problem with the push access is that if you grant, there's security implications there. So what I thought initially with this is that Wiby in Wiby JSON, you could have something like this would link to the repository of the actual dependency that you want to test. And then you would have another configuration option, which says organization for forks. And it would automatically fork the thing, would maintain automatically the branches, would rebase automatically. But basically it would create the forks in the organization that you own that is specifically meant for testing these. And then it would just be maintaining these forks to keep them up to date with upstream.
My main question was, how many modules do we think that won't work with? Like you do a fork, but when you run the tests don't pass because of something that you didn't get by just doing a fork.
Yeah, so like server infrastructure or something like that, right? Like they might have custom Circle CI or something like that.
Yep. There is all of that. Yes.
I'm just wondering, like, have you run into any that are like that? Like we know that can happen, but like, have you run into anything where that has happened yet?
I don't know, but I'm sure there are plenty. Like there's things that use browser stack and source labs, and there's tokens, and there's a lot of concerns there. But I mean, it's a starting point. I think ideally, what I'd like to see is that when you do a fork, you would be opening a pull request against these things that would, like if you are a large organization, then you can probably afford to have a separate repository with all the setup, and maybe the tooling can help do that setup. If you are a sort of critical package, then similarly the way Sigim works, right, is you work together with the people that are maintaining these original packages to sort of arrange all of that. But there's the thing with opening pull requests rather than running this just on forks and implying the setup is that you would be distributing the actions minutes as well, which is also a constraint, right?
And you're definitely
remains to be seen.
Definitely helping the module owners, right? Because you're running this to make sure you don't break them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know. I think I'm totally on board with like that's the way to get there. I was just curious if we had any data, and it sounds like we're just too early. Too early. That.
Yeah. I think my goal here is that to get to the point where I'm comfortable asking somebody that,
Right. Yeah.
you know, is this good enough for you to at least trial? And you know, there's some gotchas there that just prevent me from doing that for the past few months.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting. We could even. I know you were asking about modules last time. I was just thinking like even maybe some of the modules we have within the node repo might be candidates at some point. I mean, node add-on API comes to mind, but that one might be trickier since it's actually got native code, but who knows? I did ask in the node shift org, and I don't think we found any that were particularly good candidates just because there were limited dependencies, or they're more like samples or something versus a real package.
It's interesting that this is the approach that we're taking, the org one at least, because Microsoft does something similar. I don't think it's very public. I think there's maybe a blog post about it. The org used to be public. It is no longer public, because people were rightfully confused why Microsoft had an org that had every module we depended on. But Microsoft does something similar where we basically fork every repo into an org and then run its tests. We run it on our infrastructure, so we genericize it and just run what, like, we don't try to enable custom infrastructure, like that just get too expensive. And also we have our own infrastructure. But yeah, this is like not far off from what we currently do. I think I don't think the expectation is we're checking to see if we're breaking people, but you're not far off of what Microsoft has already gone the path we've gone down for JavaScript.
It's not wild. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're very, very close. So
cool.
I hope that provides some validation.
Like, that does help.
Yeah. I could probably track down the people who run it. It's called Terrapin. I could track down the people who run it probably if you'd want to talk to them, if that'd be a helpful thing to see like what problems they had and like what solutions they came up with. So
definitely. Cool. Yes, please. All right. Okay, cool. Any other questions? Oh, okay, cool. All right. Yeah, we'll see where do we take this forward. And I mean, I think overall it depends on what people want, right? It's easy enough to extend it to just run npmt locally against some of these repositories, right? You just, but yeah, there's tooling that was already built to do that. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, this from back, I think it was not this last December, but the December before, the discussion at the Node+JS Interactive, I think it was called at the time, was like all around this, making it a cooperative thing where you can run in the dependencies and use the actual tests and, get around a bunch of the problems you would have by just trying to run npm tests, which, we know doesn't quite solve the problem. So
it's also not enough to run npm tests because
right.
The correct set of node versions to run against, like if you're breaking somebody's node 8 or something, you want to know.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but it's great to see you've pushed it, gotten it this far where people could start to try out the concept, because we were like, we think this is a good idea. But to see whether people will like opt in and let somebody else run their tests and stuff is a, is still the open question. So.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. So we'll see where we take this. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for the demo, Dominic. I guess back to the other items on our agenda, we've got the suggested list of modules to help get support info into. I think this has been on the agenda for a little while. Does anyone have any updates on this one?
I don't have any updates.
Yeah, I think folks in Neoform, I think we'll start doing that pretty soon. Just need to arrange and get it done. No objections there.
Great.
Do we have any further like advocacy for this kind of planned in the pipeline, like further blogs or anything?
We don't have anything planned, but maybe after Nearform, adds it to their modules, we can think about what the next steps would be. We can point to like a couple companies having done it, and
Yeah, sounds good.
If you'd like, I can talk to the SDK team. Could you send me that? Or wait, that's in the agenda. Never mind. I can talk to the SDK team at Microsoft. I can't assume that, I assume that they're not going to, but I can at least talk to them.
it's worth asking because it's pretty easy to add. It's not a lot of
Yeah.
not a lot of work, but the worst thing they can do is say no, right? So it's good. It's great if you can ask them.
I think the thing that they'd want to do is like they'd want to do it across everything, which like they try to be consistent with stuff. We even have like an internal package spec for how we structure package JSONs and stuff. So yeah, I will see if that's a thing we could do.
Sounds good.
Is that tooling that enforces that public in
I don't think it's, oh gosh, it might be public. Let me look real quick. Soft package. Oh, I don't remember the repo. It was like a year and a half ago that I was working on it with them.
There is a public one. I don't know if it still is, but GoDaddy pulled some stuff off of it.
Nice. It was run by Brian. Brian Turleson's the one who like owns it, so I can ask him. But yeah, I will see. I'm not seeing it, so I'm guessing not. Like searching package in the Microsoft org. But yeah, not. Yeah, I'll get answers to both those.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. So probably nothing further on that one. Just keep track of our progress.
Yep.
Next one on the list is suggest ignoring of vulnerability by package maintainer.
So that one, I think, as I understand it, the collaboration space is still being kicked off. So I haven't seen the sort of kickoff yet, but I'm hoping it's any time now.
Okay, sounds good. And what will the kickoff look like? Like, is that a series of meetings set up, or?
I think there should be like Darcy was talking about a like a doodle for people who are interested, and I think at least a blog post. I'd asked, and Rachel and Darcy were working on a blog post to sort of present and explain, provide some context and say, hey, would you like to get involved? Come over here, fill in this doodle, and we'll get started, right?
Okay, sure, sounds good. So I'm assuming nothing further on that one. Then we've got another similar one, next steps on support levels in the package JSON.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've already covered that with the previous one.
Okay. That seems to be everything we had on the agenda. Are there any pressing issues folks know of that we should go through and talk about today?
I don't have any.
One thing, there is the admin request to move the labeler issue or labeler GitHub action. Is that I asked the question in there of, is that something that we'd want to do, or would it make more sense under the PKG.js org? Since it seems like it's relatively tooling that's within the scope of package maintenance, and like I don't know if it'd go into a home other than like generic it exists in Node otherwise. Is that something we want to talk about? I can give you a link if you give me 1 second.
Yeah, I guess my very first, I did read that one. My very first thought is, like, I thought this one was more like tools being worked on by the package maintenance team as opposed to just general
Gotcha.
things.
Yeah,
So
and
if
I
it's
get
being used in Node, I would just say, why don't we just pull it into Node if it makes sense, right?
okay. Yeah, it seems like something that would be related to our work, so that's also kind of part of the question. There is this like, you know, related enough to the package maintenance stuff? But if not, that's fine too.
Yeah, what does it do? I didn't quite like it.
It seems to be an auto labeler for GitHub issues, basically. I could be off on that. I was looking at it during a meeting, so I you know, I could be wrong.
Yeah, that's
But,
kind of what I thought it was too, but
yeah.
that just seems more general tooling than
Okay.
package maintenance necessarily. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's also very specific. Like I'm looking at the labels, it's very specific to Node, the ones that they provide. So yeah,
Right.
that's fine. Never mind. Cool.
Okay. Sure. So last call for any other topics to speak about today? No? Okay, with that, I guess makes sense to give folks a little bit of time back and speak to you all next time.
Thanks, and thanks for cheering.
Bye.
It is. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.